I'm going to start in Chicago. The new figure on the scene is this Greg Bovino guy. He is the one who comes on board the ICE train with a really heavy, aggressive view of trying to get a lot of arrests and trying to come in heavy with tear gas and other performative aspects. And tear gas is more than just performative, it's real, but I'm just saying with a big show of force in Chicago. So much so that he was called into Chicago court and told that he had to be there every day to report to the judge because the judge felt he was so much ignoring the orders of the court in terms of respecting the civil rights and basic decency associated with a presence in Chicago. The appeals court reversed that decision, so he doesn't have to show up every day. First, your thoughts on that, then I'll play a little video of him emerging from the court, claiming victory. But first, your thoughts on what's going on in Chicago.
Well, I thought it was a little bit kind of counterproductive for the appeals for the district court to say that he had to appear in her court every single day. By the way, I'm getting quite an echo. Are you, Mark?
Well, let me try to do this.
I thought maybe I could try to. Also, my sound is down.
Yeah. That we don't have our. Of course, we don't have our. Hang on one second.
Could you do a news story and I'll try to connect different?
Yeah. Why don't you drop out for a second and and we'll get back. This is the problem is that we don't have Albert today, and as a result, we are perhaps vulnerable to some of the. I blame Albert, says Cameo. Yeah, we're maybe vulnerable in ways that we.
I didn't think it was so bad though. I could hear what he's saying and I understand it. So
no, I get that, but he's hearing echo. You see, so that makes it difficult. It's not just us. So it's a yeah. But I mean,
I blame you.
Well, I don't think. But let's try Katz again and see if we can't make it happen.
Any better?
Is that you sound okay to us? Yeah. Are you hearing an echo, or what's your situation?
Let's hear. I'm hearing an echo, but you know, Mark, I've done a lot of. When you do the UK, you get a big echo too. So at least
are you okay now?
Back at me across the Atlantic, Mark.
Yeah. Are any better now or not? No.
Not really. But let me just talk about the Chicago situation. So what happened was, I think the district judge, by saying that he should come to her court every single day, I think that led itself to being reversed by the appeals court. It just sounded like it was too heavy-handed a response to this Bovino guy, who, of course, has been going into these cities like Chicago in a very heavy-handed way. My understanding was that he was kind of the field commander out here in LA, and of course, they greatly exceeded their authority and basically did things that the courts would later find illegal out here. Now he's the sort of martinet who's performing, and he goes right out into the street with the troops. One of the things he's accused of is having thrown a canister of tear gas himself, even though he was ordered, along with the rest of his troops, not to throw tear gas, not to use tear gas. So the reason that he's crowing, though, is because, number one, the appeals court did reverse this order that he has to go to her chambers or courthouse every day at 6 o'clock and report on the latest compliance or non-compliance with her order. But the rest of her order has pretty much stood, and the rest of her order does make him give all kinds of documents to the court, including what they call after-action reports. So every time that they take one of these violent actions out in the street, or violence ensues, or there's a car crash, and they say, oh, it was the protesters' fault, and the protesters say, oh, no, it wasn't. ICE just drove into a crowd, or they used a car as a lethal weapon against someone they were trying to detain. The after reports will shed light on that, although they're, of course, subjective and written by the officers, but also the body cams have to be kept and turned over. So he's really crowing about a non-victory, because right now this judge, her name is Ellis, she was appointed by, I think, Obama. she's really got a firm grip of this situation. And I think what they're going to show, Mark, is that it's really the officers who've been exceeding the law and just basically making stuff up. And of course, the proof of the pudding will be in the tapes. And the government, the Trump administration's lost on the tapes. They have to do the taping so far, and they have to turn over the tapes. And the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals did not reverse that. What they reversed was just he doesn't have to go every day at 6 p.m. to her courthouse.
I wanted you to see the emerging from the courthouse from Bovino, who, again, is the Customs and Border Patrol commander at large, and he will have more and more control over things as these policies take hold. There's a big shakeup at ICE, as you know, Department of Homeland Security, and here is. And I want you to pay particular attention to, look at the people around him. These are the feds, his people, Customs and Border Patrol people, with their camouflage, with their face covered. And the reason I really want you to pay attention to this is, to me, I don't get the camouflage thing. You're in Chicago. I mean, there's no need for you to be wearing camouflage. And the face coverings, again, it's all in the dark glasses, all part of this show of military force. And I think it's to remind the public that we're big, bad, and we will kick some ass. Don't get in our way. Look at the Chicago cops. You can see their faces. Their faces aren't covered. They have ID the way you're supposed to. And here was his the crowd shouting him down. As he gets into the van, he puts his hand and fist in the air, and then he flips the bird to the crowd. Keep it going, if you would. Oh, that's him. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's the flipping the bird. Yeah, sorry. You can see him there in the center of the screen. He drives himself in a Border Patrol pickup truck that's wrapped with the Border Patrol insignias. But to me, there was a lot there in just the show. You can see, again, look at these guys. They are full on military strapped. And I once again don't get it, but I get it only if I see it from the standpoint of messaging to the public. But go ahead, David.
Well, I think that the courts, if they get a case that pertains to this, I think that they may order that they not be obscured in this way so that they can't be identified. That's the scary thing. I'm sure that they'll come in with evidence that they can be identified by some other means, but I don't think it really washes. And I agree with you, Mark, that it's certainly being done for the intimidation. You know, there's having stormtroopers. People call them stormtroopers. These are the things that we associate with stormtroopers. These are the things that we associate unidentified, troops, the way that they're dressed. As you say, they're covering their faces in a way that their identities in a way that the Chicago Police Department are not. And so it's definitely done for intimidation and to make it difficult to identify them. So if there's a civil rights violation, yes, they may know who it is. And in discovery, the plaintiff, if they sue the government, may be able to find out who it was who violated their civil liberties. But you sure don't find out very readily. You don't remember, hey, it was the guy who had the little thing above his left eye. It was the other guy who had that. It was the lady. I remember what she looked like. The idea is that you can't identify them. And of course, it's very intimidating. I don't exactly buy the argument that you don't really know who's coming along. I think in these situations where you're by the, where you're right by the, gas station, the car wash place, and you see them coming the way that they come, and by now we know their MO. They're probably not a gang. We probably know that it's them. This idea that I had no idea, I didn't even know it was the government. Yes, I think by now you know it's the government, but that isn't the whole remedy. Who in the government? Are they doing this properly? And then, of course, they don't like to be photographed, which is another thing that does remind you of a third world banana republic, fascist republic. I'll say the word. Democratic law enforcement officers, we know who they are. They properly identify themselves. That's part of the Fourth Amendment. That's part of our Constitution. That's part of our whole democratic system. And these anonymous people, even if you know with the government, the other thing that's anomaly, of course, is that they're CBP, Customs and Border Patrol. They're not anywhere near the border when they're in Chicago. And so, of course, they're screaming about that. I think they have this really frivolous argument that they keep making that they have a right to be there, because when you go out on Lake Michigan 3 miles, you're in international waters. So they're actually, Chicago is 3 miles from the border because it's 3 miles from international waters. This is absurd. No one in their right mind thinks that Chicago is 3 miles from another country.
Yeah, it's torture, to say the least. I also wanted to mention the Supreme Court is now saying they want to rule on whether or not President Trump can deploy this National Guard in the Chicago area. They're saying or suggesting that a ruling is still weeks away. They want additional information. This is the Supreme Court again before they can rule. I wonder if you can comment on this and maybe handicap that for us.
Well, the Supreme Court is handling this, I think, in a very sensible way so far. They haven't just overturned the Court of Appeals. So that leaves the stay in effect. That means that they cannot deploy the troops. That's true in California, and it's true in Illinois and in Chicago. Trump cannot deploy the troops. There's an issue whether he can, quote, federalize the National Guard. But the point is that he cannot deploy them into the streets. He cannot deploy them into our communities. And that the U.S. Supreme Court has not changed. They said they need to think about more of these appellate rulings, but they're not allowing deployment during the time that the Supreme Court is thinking. So they're going to be taking additional briefs on that issue. And I've always thought that that issue was going to come out okay for our civil liberties because of the power of the Posse Comitatus Act, which is very clear that the military cannot engage in civilian functions, even law enforcement functions, absent there being a rebellion or an insurrection of the level that we clearly do not have. And judges make determinations whether definitionally something fits or not. Definitionally, as a matter of definition, this does not fit. And on top of that, you have to make a showing, Mark. The government would have to make a showing before deploying troops that other means did not work. And now one of the semantic issues in it is, do the means, other military means didn't work, or does it mean other law enforcement means didn't work? But the fact is that normal law enforcement means have worked in Chicago, in Southern California, in Northern California. And so they're really not anywhere near meeting their burden in the U.S. Supreme Court, I believe, after this briefing of showing that, normal means haven't worked. Normal means have worked. And I'm admiring all the demonstrators around the country. I'm admiring the 7 million protesters. Nobody was arrested, which means that there were no agent provocateurs. And if there were, the other protesters told them, don't do that. You're just bringing the heat. You're just bringing an excuse for Trump to bring in the military. So I think the demonstrations, even in Portland, have stayed more peaceful than they were, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. And that's all to the good. I think the Supreme Court is going to not change the decisions of what will end up being the 7th Circuit and the 9th Circuit. By the way, I said the 9th Circuit. I do want to take a Katsudama's point on this, because I said that the decision that was 2-1 by the 9th Circuit overturning Judge Immergut up in Portland, Oregon, was just 2 Trumpy judges. And there you are. You got 2 Trumpy judges. Yes, they're on the appellate court. They'll be there for the rest of their life. I'm not looking forward to the first time I appear in front of either of them, Mark. But they're 2 Trumpy judges. I've said it. I believe it. And that's the way it is. And they have now been, the case has been taken en banc, which means as an entire bench, just yesterday by the 9th Circuit. What that means is that the 9th Circuit's chief judge, who's a reasonable, sensible person, the chief judge is going to be on that panel, and then they randomly pick another 10 from the active judges. There are about 25, 27 active judges. So 10 of them will be picked at random. Given the composition of the 9th Circuit, I think that bench will be very fair, and I think that they will reinstate Judge Immergut's opinion up there in Portland, Oregon, and that's all going to be good, Mark.
And let's just want to underscore what David Katz has just said, and please, David, correct me. This is about whether or not Trump has the right to put the National Guard there in Portland, correct?
She made 2 decisions. One was that she did not allow Trump to federalize the National Guard when the Trump administration failed on that with a Trump-picked district judge, this Judge Immergut, who I know and is an excellent judge. Whether picked by Trump or not, she's an excellent judge. She ruled against the Trump administration. Then the Trump administration tried to circumvent her by saying, okay, they wouldn't federalize the Oregon National Guard. They had already federalized the California National Guard, so they would send the California Guard into Oregon. She also blocked that order, and it looks like that both of those orders, the result of them is that Trump cannot deploy any National Guard troops, whether from Oregon or from some other state. There was also the threat that he was going to send Texas National Guard up to Oregon, and we have this wonderful civil rights war type spectacle where basically Californians would be invading Texas and Texans would be invading, I don't know, New York. A terrible situation. No one in their right mind could think that that made any sense, and she blocked that from happening, and that has not happened. The National Guard from one state has not been sent into another state to try to enforce the law anyplace.
The purge at the Justice Department continues as history continues to be recharacterized, David. I'm seeing this. The Justice Department placed 2 federal prosecutors on administrative leave after they described the January 6th defendants pardoned by President Donald Trump as a, quote, mob of rioters. The prosecutors, Carlos Valdivia and Samuel White, used the phrase in a sentencing memo that was filed Tuesday in the case of Taylor Toronto, a MAGA enthusiast who prosecutors say stormed the Capitol on January 6th and was involved in a scuffle with police officers trying to force the mob out of the building. Trump pardoned Toronto and about 1,500 others, as you know, the January 6th rioters. The pardon did not cover, though, Toronto's other actions in 2023. He perpetuated a bomb hoax, then he showed up to former President Barack Obama's neighborhood with weapons and ammo in his van. He was convicted in May of illegally carrying 2 firearms without a license, unlawfully possessing ammunition, and false information and hoaxes. He is 39 years old. He's sentenced today, I believe, and it's unclear who's going to appear in court on the government's behalf because they just fired the 2 prosecutors associated with this because they referred to him as part of the mob of rioters who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Again, this is a purging of the Justice Department and a recharacterization of history, David.
Well, this is the kind of purging that we read about in third world countries. And it's, funny when it happens there. It's so absurd, the idea that you could actually cleanse the civil service to this degree where you have people saying stuff that's totally non-factual. And you read from some of these fascist countries, like the proclamations that they make, and they're so non-factual. We used to laugh, right? I think like in Iraq, they would say stuff. Remember we were trying to get rid of Saddam Hussein down there, and his machine was hanging on, and they would issue these proclamations that were just totally non-factual. It's like, how could you write such a thing? And now, how could you get in trouble for writing what was fact? We all know this to be true. We know there were a mob of rioters. I've called them worse, Mark, from seeing it, right? On January 6th, I've called them marauders. Other people have called them a lot worse names than that. Mob of rioters is a sort of a lawyerly term to describe what was this fellow doing there. No, he wasn't a tourist, Mark. He was part of something. He was part of a mob of rioters. It was just a descriptive term in a sentencing memorandum. You want the judge to remember what this case is about. The judge has a lot of cases, and when you describe what the sentencing reasons are as a prosecutor, you want to kind of summarize them. They also wanted to point out that he should get at least a 27-month prison sentence because he wasn't just part of the mob of rioters, and I think they had photos of him inside the building and stuff like that. They had very strong proof against this fellow. But then he had this incident with the Obama address, and they had said that Trump had disseminated, I guess on Truth Social, this Obama address, and this person got from Truth Social, got from Trump's Truth Social account, the address, and had gone to that address. I don't know if it was the right address or not, but he went there with some kind of weapon and rounds of ammunition. You want to remind the judge that the reason this guy shouldn't get probation or a light sentence, but should get 27 months was because he got caught doing that. Those are the 2 lines that got, number 1, excised from the sentencing memo. A sanitized sentencing memo got submitted. And those 2 prosecutors, who so far as they know have nothing to do with politics, they're career prosecutors. They just wrote that to be descriptive about the case. They were humiliated. Their computers were turned off. They were marched out of the building like they were criminals. I don't know if they've been fired. They may have some civil service protection, but they've certainly been the equivalent. I mean, they're administratively suspended or whatever it is. Maybe they'll come to their senses. I mean, you wonder someone like the majority leader of the Senate, Toon. You wonder, what does he think his legacy is going to be? You don't think the history books are going to mention that he was part of this group that first was marauded on themselves, that first they were going to hang Mike Pence. They all sat there terrified. Probably many of those Republican senators who now walk around like nothing happened were peeing in their pants, terrified. Who wouldn't be terrified what was going on over there? They made all those speeches at the time. Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, they all called those marauders much worse than a mob of rioters. And now they stand by. They should be on the phone right now. You reinstate those two people if you have any concern for our rule of law in America. Those two people didn't do anything wrong. They're part of the civil service. We won't vote for anything that you want, Trump, if you don't do the right thing on this. Toon, Cruz, Graham, all the people who made those statements at the time and who was like scared as they could be, now all of a sudden, let's see if they do anything about it. They sure haven't yet to reinstate those two people or the rule of law at the Department of Justice.
I mean, I don't know that they're going to die on the hill of reinstating those two. It seems as though the recharacterization of what happened on January 6th, that horse is out of the barn.
Real quickly, one hill they may be dying on. I'm getting this big echo, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry. But they did vote against the new tariffs on Canada. So they can't get the House to go along
against
with
the
them,
new tariffs, but you know,
is
David,
moving in an interesting way in the Senate with that they didn't get Toon, the majority leader, but they got our old friend McConnell, our old friend Rand Paul, and they got the two
Murkowski voted that way, yeah. But and Susan Collins. But the reason that vote, I think it's not irrelevant. But I would suggest to you respectfully that given the fact that the House is adjourned and the House likely wouldn't support that vote, you don't really have anything more than kind of a performative aspect to that vote, because you just know that that vote in the Senate isn't going to be affirmed in the House. The House isn't even there. So I'm not saying it's nothing, but I take your point. I'm just saying it doesn't quite have the teeth it might otherwise.
Mark, you're probably reading it and researching it better than I am. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but it occurs to me that there have to be 3 or 4 Republican Congress members who are right near the Canadian border. And it's hurting commerce between the border states at the north and Canada so much. It's hard to believe that there won't be, as soon as they get back into session, there won't be 4 or 5 who, at least for Canada. And it'll establish this precedent that Congress is standing up for itself. Now, they could go either way. The U.S. Supreme Court could then say, when they have the argument, which is coming very soon on the tariffs, the huge argument this term, they may say, you see, the Congress knows how to take care of matters when they want to. They did the right thing by Canada, and they didn't do the right thing by the other countries of the world, which means that they tacitly approved what Trump did with all the other countries in the world. So yes, that could end up being manipulated by the U.S. Supreme Court. But again, I still stand by that. I think there are 5 or 6 votes to overturn the tariffs because there's not a real emergency. That's coming up real soon.
That is going to be, if that happened, it's going to be a titanic day in terms of the law and in terms of public policy and economic policy.
I'm worried because they keep allowing the tariffs to be collected. You would think that the U.S. Supreme Court would stop those tariffs from being collected if they were really going to go the way that I think that they're going to. But I think the U.S. Supreme Court, if they do go the way I say, they'll just decide, you know what, that's not our problem. We have administrative courts, these courts of claims. They'll deal with getting the money back to people. We'll make that great principle that was not an emergency either. There's 2 things that Trump is doing that are outrageous, that are not emergencies. He's sending the military, trying to send the National Guard into cities where there's not an emergency. And he's doing this thing on the international stage with tariffs where there's not an emergency because drugs are coming into this country for a long, long time. That's not emergent. And we have a trade imbalance, which is worse on account of Trump, which is also not emergent.
Yeah, I mean, you know, once again, applying logic to the policies from Donald Trump really will get you nowhere. This is the force of personality, and the fist is a powerful one to the point that no one wants to get hit with it in the legislature. And I would even argue in the Supreme Court on some level, they may be cowed. Those votes that are even in play, as you say, you know, kind of the court is pretty much a cake that is baked, and there are just a couple of votes that might be in play. I want to ask you quickly in our last couple of minutes, I'm sorry about the echo, but There are 24 states that are suing the administration right now over the decision to suspend food stamps during this government shutdown. This is really relevant. I mean, it's a lawsuit led by New York, California, and Massachusetts, and they're asking a federal judge to force the Department of Agriculture to tap into emergency reserve funds to distribute food benefits. There's 42 million families and children who rely on this SNAP program. The USDA is saying that no benefits are going to be issued beginning Saturday. So, again, one of the most effective tools to fight hunger is now very much imperiled. Can you speak to that lawsuit?
I think that lawsuit is going to succeed. I think it's in Boston in front of a U.S. district judge there. It's brought by at least 2 or 3 different states. I think the remedy would be nationwide. It would be one of those nationwide injunctions. It would just end up being that way. I don't think that you'd get your food stamps in New York and California and Massachusetts and not in the other 47 states. And I think that the U.S. Supreme Court might let that stand, even though they claim that they don't want these district judges issuing nationwide injunctions. Even this U.S. Supreme Court, Mark, I know people think that they're heartless and look at some of the things that they've done, like Dobbs. I just don't think that they want to be championing. There'll be Hoovervilles. There'll be people starving in the streets. It'll be like the worst days of the Depression. The food banks cannot get food to people that fast. There's a lot of babies and young kids who will die of hunger in America. This is not a third world country, right? And so I think that the judge will make that ruling, and I think that the U.S. Supreme Court won't disturb it. Our Attorney General out here in California said there'll be about a week's delay anyway. The Trump administration claims that all these reserve funds, all this money that's sitting around, none of it can be used for the SNAP program. There's this bureaucratic hurdle, there's that mess. Meanwhile, when it comes to paying the military, suddenly $5 billion can immediately be cleared off the books. Research and development can be used for that. So I think that one's going to come out all right. If it doesn't come out all right, and I believe very strongly the Democrats should stick together on the, on their position on the Trump, closing the government, the Republicans closing the government over the health benefits. But I really think if we get to that point where that judge either doesn't rule for the Democratic states or the appellate courts really do reverse it and there are people starving in America, I think the Democrats have to give on that one. They can, not open the government up for other things, but I just think they have to give on that one. And maybe they have to give on the FAA. I don't know about you, Mark, but I don't want to fly anywhere. I mean, no client of mine has needed me to fly anywhere for them, but I'm kind of holding my breath. I mean, maybe that's a very upper middle class problem, but I really don't want to fly anywhere.
No, I think it's a huge issue. I've been talking about it since the government shutdown hit, that the one way in which I think all Americans are going to be hit, it's not just all Americans aren't SNAP recipients, but all Americans on some level will feel the ripple effects of the transportation issues, that these major transportation hubs that are affected by this air traffic control thing. It's scary. I have to take a flight middle of next week, a major international flight. I have to fly from LA to Miami and then Miami to Colombia and then and 10 days later fly back. And this is just crazy. This is a jacked up way to do government. And it's just, and again, I'm expressing the kind of anger and outrage about all of these things, and I think more and more Americans should. But I want to get clear on what you're saying. You think that the Democrats should relent and they should provide the votes if SNAP looks to be imperiled the way it is? That would mean that they'd have to reopen the government here in the next day or so.
I just think that they have to. Let's see what the judge does. I think that the judge will rule in the favor of the states tomorrow. And then the Democrats can play it by ear. And I think that the appellate court won't back up and the U.S. Supreme Court won't back up the administration. They won't want to see all those people starving. But I think if we really are in the situation where people are starving, if the full impact of the lack of SNAP hits, I just think the Democrats have to. They just have to. I mean, they're the Democrats. We're for the people, the working people, the poor people. We just can't let that happen. And take whatever supposed political hit by, quote, backing down. But I think that the public will understand that we back down to save thousands and thousands of hungry kids and people. I mean, from starvation, Mark, this is a real thing. The idea that the food banks can distribute all the food, they can get it to people. You see what the food banks can do compared with the budget on SNAP that people need for their families and their kids. Can I say one last thing, Mark?
Yeah, I'll just note one thing before you note the last thing. And the thing I'm going to note is that you had that kind of angel investor guy who's a big MAGA Trump supporter come in and offer paid $130 million supposedly to go to the troops. The reality of that is that, each troop gets like $90, but if you spread that out, it doesn't pencil out. But the more important, relevant point, I think, is you could have had one of these angel investors from the GOP come in and go, hey, I'm going to provide all this money for these people who need public assistance for food and for support of all sorts. But you're never going to see that, because the GOP represents, in general, sadly, this kind of allegiance, and even as a fetishized aspect of military allegiance, and a total ignoring of the needs of the people who are on SNAP and other programs designed to support them. Now, go ahead.
Whenever you see someone coming in with $130 million, or they want to pay for that big, ugly ballroom, my grandmother used to always say, and what do they want for that money? And what do they want for that money?
Right, right.
For Halloween, I have my tie on. Also for Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, celebrated the next day. And I want to say 30 seconds, I'll keep this really short. That same case where I had Tommy Lasorda as a witness back in 1989, my second witness was Vincent Price. Also had no idea that this was going to be a scam, but I got to know Vincent Price on the case, and Vincent was very upset that he had done Thriller for $75,000. He told everybody that he met that he'd only been paid $75,000 to do that famous voice in Thriller, and he wanted to know, did I know anyone who could sue? Did I want to leave the government and take his case and sue everybody in sight so he would get more than $75,000? So it was all the terrible things that are happening. This country sometimes seems like Halloween. The news from Trump seems like Halloween day after day, but it's Halloween. It's Dia de los Muertos. And say a word for Vincent Price, an absolutely lovely man, a Shakespearean actor, and a guy who only got $75,000 when you hear him on Thriller, on the radio, and all over for Halloween.
The Thriller, the secret of the Thriller.
The way he said it, if you want to, if Albert were here, I'd have him try to hustle. I don't know if Kim can do the outtakes. All of you can find it on YouTube. The outtakes of the original session of Vincent Price doing the Thriller voiceover is so much fun. He's in, do you feel the boogie? You hear him, the things that they didn't use in Thriller, it really is, Michael Jackson is the Thriller. He had a wonderful style, as you say, Shakespearean delivery, and he was just brilliant in everything he did. That's really, by the way, a super cool brag that you got close to him on that case. And I love that $75,000 amount was what he was given for doing the Thriller track, which, of course, was one of the biggest songs of all time. Here, Kim found it.
Come down the hallway, Mark, he would have told you about the $75,000 and did you know a lawyer? So it's not like he kept it secret.
Here, give this a listen. Go ahead, Kim, play this.
Anytime you want.
All right, take one. Okay.
This is Vincent Price.
Hi, this is Michael Jackson.
And this is Vincent Price. And Michael Jackson is
the Thriller.
No, this is not that's not them.
Yes,
that's
I don't
not
know.
them. That's not them. I think that's just, those are people impersonating them. But because I've heard it so many times, I just know exactly what it sounds like.
You'll hear it again for Halloween.
Yeah, you'll hear it again for
in the
Halloween.
next couple of days.
This Thriller. It's always a thrill to talk to you. See what I did? That's just the kind of professional I am. David Katz, appreciate you. See you next week.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.